Welcome to the Midnight Archive. I'm your producer, Mike. Before we get started with Creepy Rick and the Brain Eater, we need your help and support by giving us comments. Let us know what we're doing right. Let us know the parts you like the most. Let us know what we're doing wrong. We love your likes and we love your subscriptions, but more than that, we need your engagement. Help us out, and I'll let Creepy Rick take it from here.
Chapter 1. The Interruption. The campfire crackled between 5 college friends as autumn darkness settled over the remote wilderness. Peter adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses and poked at the glowing embers with a long stick, sending sparks dancing into the star-filled sky. "This beats studying for midterms," Maya said, pulling her sleeping bag closer around her shoulders. The October air carried a sharp chill that promised frost by morning. Devon passed around a thermos of hot chocolate, the steam rising like incense in the firelight. "Best decision we made was leaving our phones in the car." "Speak for yourself," Cassie muttered, hugging her knees. "What if something happens out here?" "Nothing's going to happen," Rob laughed, his broad frame relaxed against a fallen log. "We're 20 miles from the nearest road. Pure wilderness." Peter nodded thoughtfully. "That's exactly why we came. To disconnect from everything and just experience nature without distractions." The conversation drifted to plans for tomorrow's hike when rustling sounds emerged from the forest beyond their circle of firelight. Something large was moving through the underbrush, crashing through dead branches with deliberate steps. "Bear," Maya whispered, her voice tight with sudden fear. They fell silent, listening to the approaching sounds. Footsteps. Human footsteps, but unsteady and stumbling. A low moan echoed through the trees. "Hello?" Devon called out. "Someone there?" The figure that emerged from the darkness made them all recoil in horror. It had been a man once, but his head was barely recognizable as human. The flesh appeared to be rotting away in patches, revealing glimpses of skull beneath. His face was a mass of decay and oozing wounds, features so distorted they couldn't determine his age or identity. The stranger stumbled forward with jerky, uncontrolled movements. His mouth hung open, emitting wet gasping sounds. Thick fluid dripped continuously from multiple wounds across his scalp. "Oh God," Cassie breathed. "What happened to him?" Before anyone could move, the man collapsed directly onto Peter, who had been rising from his position by the fire. Peter screamed as the stranger's weight drove him to the ground, his rotting head splitting open on impact. Gallons of chunky, yellowish fluid poured from the man's skull, drenching Peter's face, hair, and clothing. The liquid was warm and thick, filled with small lumpy masses that looked almost organic. Peter gagged and sputtered as some of the substance flowed into his mouth. "Get him off me!" Peter shrieked, trying to push the unconscious stranger away. Rob and Devon rushed forward, rolling the man's limp body away from their friend. The stranger lay motionless on the forest floor, his breathing shallow and labored. More fluid continued seeping from the massive wound in his head. Peter sat up, wiping frantically at his face and spitting repeatedly. "What is this stuff? It's everywhere." Maya grabbed their water bottles, pouring them over Peter's head while he continued retching. The thick substance clung to his skin and hair like syrup, refusing to wash away easily. "We need to get you cleaned up properly," Devon said, his voice shaking. "The creek's just down the hill." They looked down at the unconscious stranger. His chest rose and fell in irregular patterns, but he showed no signs of waking. The massive head wound continued oozing fluid onto the forest floor. "We can't just leave him," Cassie said, though she made no move to get closer. "We can't carry him either," Rob replied grimly. "He needs medical attention we can't provide." Peter stood unsteadily, still dripping with the stranger's bodily fluids. "I feel sick. Really sick. We need to get this stuff off me right now." The 5 friends gathered their flashlights and headed toward the sound of running water, leaving the mysterious stranger unconscious by their dying campfire. None of them noticed the small, segmented shapes moving within the pools of fluid left behind. Chapter 2: Contamination. The creek ran cold and fast over smooth river stones, reflecting their flashlight beams like scattered diamonds. Peter waded in up to his waist, still fully clothed, desperate to wash away the stranger's biological matter. "It's not coming off," he said frantically, scrubbing at his hair and face. "It's like it's soaked into my skin." Maya stood on the bank, shining her light over the water. The yellowish fluid dispersed in cloudy trails downstream, carrying the lumpy masses away in the current. Small chunks floated past them, some still moving with their own momentum. "Just keep washing," Devon encouraged. "It has to come off eventually." Peter dunked his head completely under the frigid water, coming up gasping and shivering. As he surfaced, he coughed violently and spat into the creek. "I think I swallowed some of it," he admitted, his face pale in the flashlight beam. "One of those lumpy things. I could feel it go down my throat." "That's not possible," Cassie said, though her voice lacked conviction. "You would have felt it." "I'm telling you, I swallowed something," Peter insisted. "It was solid, about the size of a marble. When that guy collapsed on me, some of that fluid went right into my mouth." Rob helped Peter out of the creek, offering him a spare jacket from his pack. "We need to hike out first thing in the morning. Get you to a hospital." "Why didn't we bring our phones?" Maya asked, frustration evident in her voice. "This is exactly why people carry cell phones." Devon shook his head. "You know why. We came here to disconnect, to experience nature without constant digital interruption. Remember? It was your idea too." "That was before some zombie showed up and bled all over Peter," Maya snapped. They made their way back to camp, where the stranger remained unconscious exactly where they'd left him. His breathing was even more labored now, and the pool of fluid around his head had expanded considerably. Peter sat by the rekindled fire, wrapped in Rob's jacket and shivering despite the warmth. "I can taste it," he said quietly. "That stuff. It's like metal and rot mixed together." "We'll start hiking at dawn," Rob decided. "The ranger station is about 15 miles northeast. We can make it by afternoon if we push hard." "What about him?" Cassie gestured toward the unconscious man. They all looked at the stranger's still form. In the firelight, his condition appeared even worse than before. The decay seemed to be spreading, and new wounds had opened across his scalp. "We'll send help back," Devon said finally. "It's the best we can do." Peter nodded, then suddenly pressed his hands against his stomach. "Something's wrong. I feel different." "It's just shock," Maya said, though she didn't sound convinced. "You've been through trauma." But Peter's expression suggested something more than psychological distress. He kept touching his abdomen, as if trying to locate the source of an internal disturbance. The creek continued flowing in the distance, carrying the stranger's contaminated fluids downstream toward other water sources, other communities. None of them considered what might happen to anyone else who came into contact with the dispersed material. They took turns keeping watch through the night, but the stranger never stirred. As dawn approached, his breathing became increasingly shallow until it stopped altogether. By morning, he was dead. Chapter 3: Internal Movement. They buried the stranger in a shallow grave using their camping shovels, marking the spot with a cairn of stones. None of them wanted to touch the body directly, so they wrapped it in a tarp before lowering it into the earth. "We'll report the location when we reach the ranger station," Devon said, shouldering his backpack. "They'll know what to do." Peter had barely slept, complaining of nausea and strange dreams. He looked pale and drawn in the morning light, with dark circles under his eyes. But he insisted he could hike. They followed the old logging road northeast, making good time despite Peter's occasional stops to catch his breath. The autumn forest was beautiful in daylight, golden leaves carpeting the trail and filtering the sun into warm, amber beams. After 2 hours of steady walking, Peter suddenly doubled over with a sharp cry of pain. "My stomach," he gasped, clutching his abdomen. Something's moving in there. What do you mean, moving? Maya asked, alarmed. Peter's face contorted with discomfort. Like something alive. Rolling around inside me. He pressed his hands against his belly, trying to locate the sensation. The others gathered around him as he bent forward, breathing heavily. For several minutes, he remained frozen in that position, his eyes squeezed shut with concentration. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the pain subsided. Better? Rob asked. Peter straightened slowly, testing his condition. Yeah. It stopped. But his expression remained troubled. They resumed hiking, but within another mile, Peter began exhibiting stranger behavior. He started talking rapidly about things that made no sense, childhood memories that couldn't be real, detailed descriptions of places none of them had ever been. The blue trees were singing, he said with complete seriousness. Under the copper sky, they sang in voices like broken glass. Peter, what are you talking about? Cassie asked. He blinked at her with confusion. The trees. Can't you hear them singing? Devon and Rob exchanged worried glances. Peter was clearly experiencing some kind of mental disturbance, possibly from whatever he'd ingested the night before. There are no blue trees, Maya said gently. The trees are all normal colors. Peter stopped walking and stared at her as if she were speaking a foreign language. Then he clutched his head with both hands, his glasses falling askew. The pressure, he mumbled. Inside my skull. It's building. His speech was becoming increasingly slurred and difficult to understand. Words ran together, and he seemed to be having trouble forming coherent thoughts. We need to move faster, Rob said urgently. Something's seriously wrong with him. But Peter was no longer walking in a straight line. He kept veering off the trail, drawn toward random trees and rocks. His friends had to constantly guide him back to the path. The voice tells me things, Peter said, his words barely recognizable. Secret things about the earth underneath. They were still 8 miles from the ranger station, and Peter's condition was deteriorating rapidly. Whatever was happening to him was accelerating, and they were running out of time. Chapter 4, Breaking Point. Peter collapsed completely after another 2 miles, his legs simply giving out beneath him. He sat in the middle of the logging road, rocking back and forth while mumbling incoherently. Can't walk anymore, he slurred, though his words were almost unintelligible. The passenger won't let me. What passenger? Devon asked, crouching beside his friend. Peter's eyes were unfocused, staring at something none of them could see. Drool began running from the corner of his mouth, thick and yellowish like the fluid from the previous night. We have to carry him, Maya said desperately. Rob and Devon positioned themselves on either side of Peter, attempting to lift him to his feet. The moment they touched him, he began convulsing violently, his head snapping back and forth. Let go! Let go! Cassie screamed. They released him, and Peter fell backward onto the dirt road. His head struck the ground hard, but he didn't seem to notice. His scalp was beginning to show small raised bumps, like insect bites but larger and more inflamed. As they watched in horror, the bumps grew into painful-looking boils. They appeared to be filled with fluid, stretching the skin tight and red around their edges. Oh God, Maya whispered. What's happening to him? Peter's condition deteriorated rapidly. The boils multiplied across his head and face, some beginning to weep clear fluid. His speech devolved into unintelligible grunts and moans. The drooling intensified, creating puddles of yellowish saliva around his head. When Devon tried to wipe Peter's face with a handkerchief, Peter bit at him like a wild animal, his teeth snapping inches from Devon's fingers. He's not Peter anymore, Rob said quietly. Something else is controlling him. The boils continued growing, some reaching the size of golf balls. They pulsed rhythmically, as if something inside them was trying to break free. Peter's scalp looked ready to burst from the internal pressure. We need to get away from him, Cassie said, backing toward the tree line. This isn't natural. but none of them could abandon their friend, even in his horrifying condition. They maintained a safe distance while Peter writhed on the ground, his head swelling larger with each passing minute. The sounds he made were no longer human, wet clicking noises mixed with high-pitched whistles. His glasses had fallen off and been crushed beneath his thrashing body. Then the boils began splitting open. Chapter 5: Emergence. The largest boil on Peter's forehead ruptured first, spraying thick fluid across the road. Something dark and segmented pushed through the opening, waving in the air like a grotesque antenna. "Run!" Rob shouted, but none of them could move. They stood frozen in horrified fascination as more boils burst in rapid succession. Peter's entire head began to split apart like overripe fruit. The skull cracked along multiple stress lines, revealing the writhing mass of something alive inside. His screams cut off abruptly as his throat filled with his own blood and other fluids. What emerged from the ruins of Peter's head was nightmare-made flesh, a centipede-like creature nearly 3 feet long, with hundreds of segmented legs and a head covered in tiny black eyes. Its body glistened with bodily fluids as it pulled itself completely free of Peter's skull. The creature paused for a moment as if getting its bearings, then scuttled away with shocking speed. It disappeared into the forest underbrush, leaving only the sound of rustling leaves to mark its passage. Peter's headless body twitched once, then lay still. Brain matter and blood pooled around the remains of his skull, mixing with fragments of bone and hair. The smell was overwhelming, like rotting meat and infected wounds. Maya was the first to vomit, followed quickly by Cassie. Devon stumbled backward, his face white with shock. "The eggs," Rob whispered, understanding dawning in his eyes. "Those lumps were eggs." They all looked down at their clothes, remembering the previous night. They had all been splashed with the stranger's fluid. Maya had helped wash Peter in the creek. Devon and Rob had carried the unconscious man away from Peter. The contamination was already inside them. As if summoned by the realization, Maya felt the first flutter of movement in her stomach. A rolling sensation, like something turning over in her digestive tract. "I can feel it," she said, her voice barely audible. "Something's moving inside me." Cassie doubled over suddenly, pressing her hands against her abdomen. "Me too. Oh God, me too." Devon and Rob experienced the sensation moments later, the unmistakable feeling of something alive and foreign moving through their internal organs. They looked toward the creek in the distance, remembering how they had washed Peter's contaminated body in the flowing water. All that fluid, all those eggs, dispersed downstream toward other water sources, other communities. How many people would drink from wells fed by that creek? How many animals would visit the water to drink? The contamination would spread exponentially, each new host eventually producing dozens more of the creatures. The 4 remaining friends stood in the middle of the remote logging road, 6 miles from the nearest help, feeling the first stirrings of their own internal passengers. By the time they could reach the ranger station, the eggs would have had hours to develop and mature. Peter's headless corpse lay as a gruesome preview of their own fate, while somewhere in the forest, the freed creature was already seeking new victims to infect. The cycle would continue, spreading outward from this remote wilderness like ripples in a poisoned pond. And there was nothing they could do to stop it. In Maya's stomach, something with tiny legs began to move.